Yes, I have no idea what's going to happen. Let's just see how it goes.
Me either. Welcome everyone out there on the internet. All of you that are watching, welcome to Dangerously Skip Permissions, where Matt and I try to get our heads around coding with LLMs. Matt, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience, background? Like, how did you end up here today?
Sure. And I'm glad to hear the name Dangerously Skip Permissions. I wasn't sure quite what it was. You threw a few examples at me, but I was like, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my name is Matt. People often call me Holden because there's a lot of Matts. But I am in Boulder, Colorado, and I sort of just have had I guess maybe an odd career where I never quite stayed in my lane, and maybe that's kind of partly how I ended up here. I thought I'd be a math professor, and when that sort of turned out not to be what I wanted to do, found my way to Google, and they told me I had this job called a product manager. I had no idea what a product manager was or what they were supposed to do, but I guess that was about I don't know, maybe 17 years ago or so. So basically, have been my whole career since then, kind of building software, talking to engineers, talking to designers, talking to customers, users, trying to kind of synthesize stuff and sort of be in the sort of like fuzzy middle space between, like everyone knows like the engineers write the code, everyone knows the designers like make the designs. No one's like very clear what a product manager is. So I've kind of always been a little bit in this the fuzzy in between, and then did a couple startups and a couple stints at Google, was at Dropbox, and then about 2 years ago, I had my second kid. I'm a dad. I've got two kids now, and decided we shut down our second startup, and I decided instead of getting a normal job, just to like build and learn, kind of see what happens. So for the last 2 years, I basically have just been like building stuff with AI. And I'd say like 2 years ago, I knew very little about AI. I'd like, I'd worked with engineers who knew how to train models. I didn't know how to train a model. But this was kind of after ChatGPT when, they just gave me like APIs and I'm like, well, I know what an API is. So now I can like, I don't know how you make these models, but I can use the models. And there's a lot of sort of product questions to figure out. So I've basically been kind of just building stuff for 2 years and have learned a lot by that. And so also just talking to folks like you. I mean, every week I hop on the phone with a few people. Hey, what are you building? How are you doing it? Swapping tips. So yeah, it's been super fun.
Yeah, we've been having a version of this conversation privately, and we'll see how it feels to have a version of this conversation publicly. Um, you mentioned fuzzy in there a couple of times. You want to tell people about
Mm,
fuzzy computer, and in particular the
sure.
metaphor of fuzzy, and because I think that is one of the things that both of us have just kind of gotten like nerd sniped by is
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I guess the origin of it, you know, I've built like 4 or 5 different apps over the last couple of years in different areas. And initially, I started out building things related to analytics, not because I necessarily wanted to build analytics things, but I just that was like a domain that I knew well. So I was like, let me at least like start with one thing that I know and figure out, how does AI change how we might use that, if any. And so I guess this was, yeah, it was around 2 years ago. I think it was 2023 when OpenAI released function calling. And function calling was like this very confusing thing, that like when I talk to other devs, they're like, "What is it?" Because like it does all these different things. You can use it to like the docs were always about like finding the weather in like Boston or something. It's like, well, why do I
it's
need to do
weather
that?
and planning trips.
It,
Those are the
it's
only.
always what I know. It's like the poor LLM's just like constantly looking up the weather, but I sort of used it in this other way. But I was building this product called Chart Pilot at the time, where I was just trying to explore. Charting is this like very large space of things that you might want to do, and if you sort of you go and you make a GUI for like all the knobs and all those sort of settings and features, you're just going to end up with something like Excel or Google Sheets that's just like a whole bunch of tabs of like GUI controls to control a chart because that's kind of the GUI version of that problem. And so I was just kind of thinking, what if you could just delete all that and kind of say what you wanted? How far could that go? And so I built it. It was a somewhat toy-like demo. It got some tire kickers. Mostly people didn't use it for real. But in doing that, I sort of had this idea that I remember thinking it was like a fuzzy command palette. And if you don't know what a command palette is, like, if you're a coder, we like live in these IDEs, like maybe VS Code or I think even Sublime Text before that had one of these where it's like, okay, there's lots of commands and
Yep.
there's a thing called a command palette where you open it up and it's like, okay, here's the commands. And so I sort of thought of this as like, it's basically a command palette, but fuzzy. I don't have to like precisely type a thing. I could just be like, hey, turn this thing forest green. And by the way, add an arrow and like it would just work. And so I think I was riffing with my friend Dion, who's been kind of another thought partner here, and he sort of liked this fuzzy metaphor. And so that was like a couple years ago. So then I just started talking about, fuzzy stuff to whoever would listen. And I thought of it as a metaphor, basically, that, these LLMs, I thought of them basically as like a fuzzy compiler. And so, a compiler is like a kind of a specialized program that sort of like takes source code that we write. These are instructions, maybe in Python or C or something, and how we want a computer to do something for us. And the compiler sort of like crunches it and does some internal stuff and like turns it into something that can run. And so I thought like, it's kind of like that, but fuzzy. I can have typos. I can just sort of blather into it. And so I thought of it just as this metaphor. And then this summer, basically, I decided like I signed up for this demo to like see, could I vibe code something very, very quickly in like 5 minutes? And I was like, I don't know, maybe not. But like in the process of trying to just figure out like if I had to do that, how would I do it? I was like, I think I need to like build fuzzy compilers. Like I need to actually like make that idea more real. And so it's just been basically this pretty useful idea generator for me of like almost just like take a good idea in computer science from like the last 50 years, and there's a lot of them that are like pretty cool. Unix, MapReduce, pipes. I'm like digging through old Wikipedia pages about like the early Unix history. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Why'd they do that? And then like just make it fuzzy and like kind of see what happens. And so it's just been this idea generator for me. And so Fuzzy Computer, it's basically in my blog. It's not a company. It's not like an official thing. It's just like the idea. To me, what excites me is that we basically have had this holy grail of like natural language understanding since like the 60s. If you go back to like the very early computer science pioneers, machine learning folks, like they were like, how do we teach a computer grammar so it can like understand English? And it's just been really, really hard. And like even the 2010s, like I'd try to like use Alexa and it just like would like mostly work if you're like in the simple cases, but like get it wrong a lot. So I just think it's this interesting idea now that like if we can actually talk to our computers the way I'm just talking to you, I'm not thinking that hard. Like we evolved to just do this in this very fluid way, and our computers until recently we had to like type this very precise syntax, and you got one character wrong and it's just like choked. And this is why like a lot of people's first experience with computer science. They're just like, ugh, it's like not for me. I'm wrestling with this like really strict thing. So anyway, yeah, I'm kind of in the like fuzzy tribe now, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's actually kind of a great segue for me to kind of bring myself in and just like set up my journey. So
Yeah.
I came into product by way of management consulting. I was at Bain and Company. I remember going through these product interviews where people were super skeptical about whether I was technical enough. I went through
Me
my
too.
whole like career, like kind of like with that in my background. But went from there, at a couple of like smaller tech companies to eventually to YouTube, where I really felt like I kind of mastered the product role. Loved working on the YouTube Creator Tools team, and from there to Stripe. And I left Stripe to start a biomaterials company, kind of at the time that somewhere in the ChatGPT 3.5 to 4, where I was
Mm.
discovering that all of a sudden I was that person that kind of I could script, but like I really hated that thing where you like have you semicolon like one space to the right and nothing runs. And it just made the feedback loop so long for me to be able to make something that I was interested in, let alone something that I liked. And so I found myself, previously giving up, and then all of a sudden I could feed it in. I can read pseudocode. I could be like, this all makes sense to me. And now it runs, right? And now I can actually see it. Or if it's breaking, I have a thought partner, and it has just exploded into this world of creativity. And that was happening at the same time that I was moving really far out of my comfort zone in terms of the domain and types of things that I was working on. And I just found myself more and more relying on LLMs as a guide, and wanting to both get the most out of them, but also not make slop. And I think that
Hmm.
is not another place for me where I just think um, that for me plays the same role that fuzzy plays for you. It's like that.
Hmm.
How do you both of those things, right? Because I don't
Totally.
think any of us really just wants to spam the world with stuff, right? I think really we want to make things that are meaningful, and we have this incredible new way to make things that are meaningful, but it also can spray a bunch of junk if you don't think about it right.
Totally.
So
Yeah, I liked meeting you. I guess we met through our mutual friend Alex Komorowski, who we both worked with, and he sort of connected us. But I think when I first heard about you, he mentioned you as like, someone who had been a PM, wasn't an engineer, but was like actually had just like built this whole app to like scratch your own itch. And like that's a little bit my tribe. Like my friend Casey's another one. It's a little bit like people who are like not really like professional software engineers, but are like just trying to figure out how to build something. And I think this has just like always been an interesting tension. Like I think like software engineers aren't going anywhere. Like understanding how computers work and servers and clients and databases, like all like authentication, like we still need all of that stuff to actually, even when working with LLMs. But I think what's sort of interesting is like, you could probably describe in English, here's what I want,
Mhm.
and the LLM can kind of understand that. But then how do you yeah, like make that with high quality. So the reason vibe coding is so fun is because you're not getting bogged down in the implementation details. You're just like, you're thinking about it more like a user, like, hey, I want it to work in this way. You're like giving feedback and it's like responding. But then the tricky thing is, like you said, it's like, it's very easy to like create slop, whether it's like, blog posts or apps. If you don't care about quality or like how well it works or, security or like that's easy. But
Mhm.
like, how do we sort of get like the joy of vibe coding, the speed, but
Mhm.
like also at like a very very high quality bar? Like I would say like like linear or something. Like a lot of our software is like crap. Like there's just bugs and like so much software. Like could we almost aspire to like the quality of like linear like software, but like some of the speed. I don't know. I mean, there's a tension there, obviously, but that's kind of the journey I think that you and I have been on of like trying to kind of figure out these new tools. That honestly, there's not really best practices. There's a lot kind of that we're all figuring out together.
And the world is a mix right now of things that are remaining the same, in that, like you just said a second ago, it really helps to understand databases. It really helps to understand scalability, like all this stuff. So you have some of those like laws of physics that aren't going away. And at the same time, you have things that can be totally rethought for this new
Hmm.
world. And it's really not clear which one is which. I think
Totally.
it's such a moment for um, experimentation. And part of the way that we got here today was at the beginning of the summer. Is you said something to me like this is the summer of vibe coding or the summer of hacking. I
Hmm.
forget exactly what you said.
Vibe summer.
Vibe
My
summer.
wife coined it. My wife's like, let's do Vibe Summer, and I was like, love it, Vibe Summer.
Well, because I think that set off a bug in me where I was like, oh, one of the things that I come back to again and again. There was a guy in the University of Toronto, I think at Waterloo, who built a fusion reactor in his dorm room. Like
Hmm.
not one that's at scale. Like he didn't, but he was able to build one in his dorm room as like a sophomore. Or junior. Maybe I'm getting
Hmm.
some of the details wrong here, but I did actually like bookmark that one and I go back to it from time to time because I do think we are entering into a world where like none of us should say I can't do it. There may
Totally.
be things that like are not theoretically possible yet. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, but you are going to be able to do more with an LLM than you think you can. Um,
Hmm.
and that's where Vibe Summer hit for me is like I just try it, right? Like see how
Yeah.
far down the path you get, see where you actually get stuck, because I bet it's farther along than you actually think.
Yeah, I mean the origin of Vibe Summer is kind of funny because like that for about the previous 6 months, one of the sort of chapters in sort of what I was building there's this kind of somewhat old programming language called LaTeX, or some people call it LaTeX, that I used to use when I was a mathematician, undergrad and grad school. And so I spent about 6 months basically building tools that would make it easier to, create LaTeX documents. And so you could like hand draw a little matrix or like a commutative diagram and like take a picture with your phone, and it could sort of somewhat magically, this wasn't me. This is like Claude or OpenAI models. Some could sort of like just squint at that like hand drawn diagram and sort of almost reverse it and figure out, oh well, here's the sort of way that you'd have to like lay out the diagram commands. And
Mhm.
so and the funny thing about LaTeX is it's this is we're still using a compiler that Donald Knuth wrote like from I think the mid 70s, and then another guy, Leslie Lamport came around. He built like another compiler, the LaTeX compiler on top of News compiler, and so I'm like, cool. Now we have an LLM compiler. It's like compilers all the way down. And so I've been working on this for like 6 months. It was like an interesting problem. Me like everyone else, I didn't know anything about evals, so it was like the first time I'm like, oh man, like it's easy to get it to like kind of work, but if I actually wanted to like not have compiler errors, like I was just sort of slogging through evals, stuff like this. And then I went to the AI Engineering World's Fair in San Francisco, which I think was in June, and I just had this like it was just a little bit shocking to me because I gone to the one the year before, and I mean it's always interesting, but like honestly, the one the year before it was like disappointing because the my main memory of that one is just hearing the word agent like 1,000 times, and I kept just asking someone like, "Do you have an agent you could show me?" And like everyone was trying to sell these multi-agent orchestration platforms, and this is like like a year and a half ago. No one could show me an agent, so it felt like they were like also everyone was like talking about microservices. I'm like, no, like let's build a server. Like where's this? Like show me one, and we hadn't
Yeah.
done it.
Yeah.
So I almost didn't go to the second one, but yeah, I'm glad I did because it was like completely different. And I think that the change was basically that we didn't have these reasoning models until like last September. So it's been like just about, it's almost like I think about exactly a year ago that like O1 Preview came out.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like reasoning plus tool use. Okay, things are starting to work in ways that like, the idea of agents wasn't wrong. The marketing pitch wasn't wrong. We just couldn't build them. They just weren't like physically possible. And so when I was at this conference, I basically just had this like feeling of like, I'm thinking way too small. Like this LaTeX stuff is cool. I've got students using it. Like, but like this is just and it just let me sort of release it. So I still have my LaTeX products. People are using them. I'm just like not, they're fine. But I'm just like I had to think bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I came back and I was telling my wife about it. She's like, and she had just left her job. And so we were like, let's just do Vibe Summer, like take the kids in an RV up to, Yellowstone and just like, and as soon as I released myself from like, let me think about how to make a startup or make a, bootstrap business, it just like, freed myself. I just suddenly just got like way more creative ideas. And like, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna solve my own problems. Like I know what some of those are. Why don't I just go solve those and not like even think about like, does anyone else have this problem yet? And then I find people like you, I could talk to them like, oh, do you have this problem? So it's been super fun. But that's kind of the story. My wife's actually the one that was like coined this like Vibe Summer idea. So
we're definitely gonna have to have her on if we make it to episode 4. We're gonna.
Yeah, she's vibe coding. I mean, this morning she was vibe coding something in Cursor, and I was like, whoa, like this, it's crazy. And she's like, oh yeah, I don't know how to code. I don't. It's like setting up the environment is a pain. I think where we are now is like she would not be able to set up the environment. It's like super painful. It's like, oh, do you have Git installed? Oh no. Do you have what are these Xcode tools? We need those. Like it's just like it took like an hour or two of slogging to like get the environment set up. But if you give someone like a strict environment, then like someone like my wife, she's like, I don't know React, I don't know TypeScript, I don't know Tailwind. I'm like, doesn't matter. Just like, now just in Cursor, just like start talking about what you want. And I come back like an hour or two later and it's like, well, you got like a working app. That's like pretty sweet.
Yeah, and I you'll know better than me about this, but I suspect that all along engineers and developers have been fighting through that pain of setup.
Yeah.
But some people were sort of like curious enough, like whatever it was about computer science or developing or coding was enough that they were going to force themselves to sit and make it work. And now the barrier to getting this, at least for me, I was able to, all of a sudden when I was able to get to something that worked or to something that looked more or less like what I wanted, the amount of time I was willing to put in to go that extra mile or to make it perfect, like raises exponentially. And then if you're like, the terminal just yells at me all the time, or like I spent 4 days and all I'm able to do is like tap on a command line. This doesn't look anything like Facebook. This sucks. What am I?
That's a nice, I mean, it almost makes me think, the sort of classic computer science thing is like hello world. You learn, you like open the first page of a textbook and Rust or C or whatever, and it's like what's the minimum, just to sort of get a thing to just say hello world. But like that's not that excited. Like, everyone has that, but I mean today it almost feels like it's almost like hello app or something. Like maybe it's not going to be safe, secure, like ready for prime time, but like how quickly can I just go from like idea to like, ooh, I'm like playing with the thing. And for me, I never wanted to be a a computer programmer. I was just like interested in math, and I was using computers as a tool to like make Mandelbrot sets or like make little gravity simulations. For me, it was just, or games. I just like made games, and like Visual Basic was like super fun for me because I would like go see some book about C++ and I'd open up, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. This like isn't for me. But when I had Visual Basic, I could just sort of drag things around and like make a little game for myself. And so I have a 6-year-old now, and it's pretty fun. Like we sometimes we'll open Claude, just the Claude chat app, and like she'll just make games. And so we'll even be like, hey, give us like 5 ideas for games, and she'll pick one. And like, and she doesn't have to know about the code, but I have a little voice thing, and so I can hold the function key, and she'll say like, like a painting game or something about animals or unicorns. She'll just like give it little feedback, and then she doesn't really know what's happening. The code streams in, but like she gets a thing in the browser that she can kind of play, and so she's in that same kind of loop as a 6-year-old that I think is she doesn't really care about the code, but it's more like hello app, hello game. That part of it's I think pretty fun.
That's wonderful. I mean, I need to steal that with we have similar age kids, which I think is another thing that brought us here. Okay. Do you want to tell us about Markdown Coding? You wrote a blog post. I'll put the blog post in the chat, and tell us about it, and we'll riff on that some.
Yeah, I mean the origin of that is, I think I'm trying to just put a name to something that I am seeing in my own day-to-day work, and I'm increasingly seeing in others. And so And what it is that, and I guess this really kind of started for me around the time that Claude Code came out and the new Sonnet Opus 4 models, because I've been using AI to code for the last 2 years, but I was used to keep them like a pretty short leash. I would like have it do a little thing, and I'm like always kind of watching, that's not quite right. And it was like we're sort of pair programming, and it would speed me up, but like I didn't give it much rope. And it was like when Claude Code came out, and then actually this was at the AI Eng World's Fair, like, because I'm there without kids, I'd like go back to my hotel room after the conference, and I was like, just like trying Claude Code, and I was like, wow, this is like pretty good. And so since then, I think what I find is I'm just like increasingly writing like markdown docs of like one sort or another. Sometimes they're specs about like a new feature I want to build. Sometimes they're just readmes that like, okay, when you start a new session, I want you to go read all of these things, but I'm like, what should I put in? What kind of things should I write down for that? Sometimes it's kind of like quality gates, like here's a bunch of like, code guidelines I want you to follow. And so then I'm chatting with folks like you and others like us, and I think where I'm mostly seeing this is either like solo builders or small startups. There's another startup, it's like a few people there, it's getting off the ground and they're just like pushing Claude Code like super hard. And all of us are kind of having the same realization. It's like, okay, these things are like the bottleneck here is not capability. It's like how much like context can you feed it? And so we're like writing all these markdown docs. And so like when we share screens, I basically just see like these folders full of often kind of messy markdown docs. So here's some notes, maybe this is specs, maybe this is docs. We all have like different naming structures. And so markdown coding, I was trying to kind of just put a name to this. I mean, in a way, I mean, kind of like how Andre Karpathy, he said sort of vibe coding to describe something that just he was doing, to kind of where you sort of almost don't care about the code. I want to make a little game or something. And so I just decided, some people I think are calling this like spec-driven development. It's probably the same idea. I just think specs even like have a little bit of baggage, or it's like not exactly clear what a spec is. So I was like, hey, it's just markdown. And so I wrote this blog post where I was kind of just describing what I'm doing, and then putting it in the context of like, in a way, this, it feels kind of scary and new. Things are changing quickly, but actually, we've been on this like kind of ladder of abstraction we've been climbing for at least like 80 years, and sort of so we'll have in some kind of personal history from IBM and just like some stories from my in-laws about this. So it's kind of back to fuzzy computing. Hey, that we've been on this journey for a long time. Compilers, tools, higher level languages, and so the way I see it is like, what if Markdown? We've been on this journey from like punch cards to assembly to C to JavaScript to TypeScript. We've gotten pretty high, but like, what if this like part of the next step might be like, could we now just actually write instructions in English in plain text? And all a Markdown is it's really just a text document. You could call it like a TXT file. That's all it really is. It's not a strict format. It just gives like a little bit more structure, so you can have like sections and headings and bold words, things like that. And so I don't know. I mean, it's a provocation. It's sort of deliberately meant to be like, I'm basically trying to force myself a little bit, almost unnaturally, to be like, like how much can I actually push myself to like program in Markdown? I need a little bit of tooling. I mean, or a little bit of code, like some glue code back there, but like it works pretty well. And it's like, it's still like writing pretty structured English in the way that like a spec might be, or a PM or designer might be. It's not like if it's super ambiguous, I'm not going to get what I want. But if I can kind of write down pretty clearly, yeah, it's like technical writing basically.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're not a pure experiment, because I've been watching your ideas and chatting with you somewhat regularly, and then like that's hitting my workflow. But one of the things I was thinking about today is I was going to ask you if you had built anything yet purely using Markdown. And as I was asking you that, I was realizing that like this is what I do. So
yeah,
like,
tell me, what are you doing?
My whole process here. So it used to be that what I would do is I would sit down. This is like Chat 4.0, no, not 4.0, but like ChatGPT 4 stage. I would do what I did as a PM. I would like write the PRD. I'd start with like the big product vision, and then I'd be okay, like what feature do I need to build first? I try to decide like how am I going to build up into something that's usable. And then I would sit down with ChatGPT and put together an implementation plan. And then I would feed something in the ChatGPT, and I would take it out and I would copy it into the IDE. And then I would try to run it, and I would feed the errors back into ChatGPT. ChatGPT would fix it. And somewhere along the line, Harper wrote a blog post. Harper Lee? I don't know Harper Reed. I'll drop this in. into the chat. He wrote a blog post about his process that was really influential on me, where he was like, look, I have the LLM assist me in creating the PRD and the implementation plan, and then I'm feeding in the bite-sized pieces. And so this became my default. But since I started using Claude Code regularly, what I've discovered is that my basic loop here is I will write a very, very short product vision that is mostly about how I want things to be and how I want them to feel. I will then work with an LLM to break that into like milestones and phases. And then I sit with Claude Code and I say, here is milestone 1. Pull this into an implementation plan for me, and let's ask me the questions you need to ask me. Let's figure out what we need to implement. There's usually about 15 or 20 minutes of us talking, and then I will go read through it very carefully, the markdown doc that it creates. And then at the end of that, I'll say, okay, let's go build it. And then it will go and build. And at the end of that, I will have in my mind, part of that doc is how am I going to test this, right? It's going to be a mix of, and I stole this from you, of automatic tests and then manual tests, things that I can see and touch and feel to make sure that I'm not getting taken or that it hasn't just like mocked the API. The API is not actually running. And then I have it write a status update at the end of it. It's like basically like what decisions did we make? How does this deviate from the plan? And I now have a document that's like status updates where I have it kind of log as it goes. And those I also read relatively carefully to make sure that there's not like stuff in there that didn't happen. But that's the loop. And then it's really the structured writing that is leading to the output. And I mean, I don't remember the last time that I really like fired up the file to spend time inside of it to like make a change.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what I love like chatting with folks like you right now is like everyone's kind of like trying to figure out different things. I mean, you asked if I'd ever like entirely written in Markdown. There's only one so far that I really forced myself to like only do Markdown, and there's this little library called Spectry, which we could talk about another time. But I'm basically trying to figure out like how can we enable more kind of like composition and reuse of these files, because basically, I can write instructions, but it reminds me of the sort of early JavaScript era where like first browsers are kind of a toy and like, okay, one JavaScript file's fine, but like eventually like, as apps start getting more complex, like this file's getting like longer and longer and longer. It's like getting a little bit hard to manage. And so then you want to start to kind of break it up into pieces or maybe call them components or something. And so I'm trying to kind of figure some of that out. And so for that one, I thought, okay, well, at least if I'm trying to figure out Spectry, I'd at least try to use, specs to build Spectry. But there was something a little bit unnatural about it. So with that one, I think I basically like riffed with Claude Opus like back and forth to like kind of write this like quite detailed like technical spec that got pretty long, because it's almost like what about this edge case? What about circular references? What about if there's an at and a space before the file? And it got like pretty detailed. And then but then I was like, all right, this is looking pretty good. And then I think I just had Claude Code. Like I said, okay, now read this and go write all the unit tests for it. So it turned out like 30 or 40 tests for like all the cases. And then I said, okay, go write the code, and it kind of was filling it in. And the one interesting part of that was that at some point, I forget if it was during the test or the code, it sort of realized there's like an ambiguity, like ooh, like there's something in the spec that's like not clear, and we were able to go back and almost like kind of like fix that. But I'll admit that like it felt a little bit unnatural, almost in the way that like a really strict waterfall would feel unnatural, to like write this like really long detailed PRD before you would even start building. And so I don't usually do that. When I more recently, I'm either like when I started the next version of Spectry, actually what I did was I didn't start with specs at all. I was like, okay, now I want to sort of start on the V2. Let's go quickly code a prototype sort of as quickly as we can to kind of get in the ballpark of how I want this to work. And in the process of doing that, we learned quite a bit. And then I was like, okay, actually there's kind of these 3 modules. Let's separate them. And then I kind of filled in, okay, now let's pin down a spec for like each of these 3 things. I can even show you some examples of the project thing if you want. I mean, does this thing work to let me share my screen? I mean, I think it's always, I feel like it's always interesting to just like see examples. People talk about this stuff all the time on Twitter, but you're always like, where are the examples? Like, what can I, let's see, screen. So you can probably see this, right? Infinite, Matt and James. So this is like one, I have like too many projects going on at once. I probably have like 8 cursor windows open, but this is one project I'm working on called Spec Hub. But truth is, I'm not exactly sure what it is yet. I'm just kind of building it for me. But I tend to have a bunch of markdown files. This is maybe too small. I don't know if you can see this. But like, these are sort of archived. So what I tend to do is I have like evergreen documents I just call readmes. And my thinking here is like, that Cursor, everyone has sort of a proprietary way to do this. Cursor wants Cursor rules, and Windsurf has their thing, and Claude wants Claude MD, and then there's this agents thing. And so I sort of want to keep these things like pretty small. And so now I just say like, hey, go read all the readmes. So I don't want to like duplicate, hundreds of lines there. So what I've been just kind of any sort of evergreen context that I would basically, if like a new grad joined this project, I'd be like, hey, before you do your task, like, go read some of these. Like, here's our stack, something about auth. So this is sort of evergreen content. And then when I do a project, I just call them projects. Like, I guess they're specs, but I just call it a project because usually it's either like a new feature or here we're probably adding like API tokens. And so, what I've kind of found is I've tried different things. Like, do you want to have sort of the product stuff over here and then tasks over there, or like what I like now is like just like a single vertical slice where I can add some value that I can like test and play with, and like almost like scope it down as much as possible because I'd rather keep the scope narrow and then just churn through more of these. And so I kind of like write up these little project docs where at the top there's usually like a goal. This one looks like it just jumps right into implementation. Maybe what's a good one? Like list. I don't know. So here's an objective. Okay, it's kind of high level approach of like what's going to be needed to achieve it. Some stuff about what's success, and then I've sort of liked this. Like Claude basically like writes this up for me, or like, but just phases and tasks because I actually don't want to. I don't want to like babysit every single task, but I do really like kind of having these phases or milestones. So like, and I kind of say then, okay, when you get to each phase, like stop. I want to, both like see what the code's looking like, but also like, pull it up in my browser, like actually play with it, basically see like, are we on track? And so somehow I just think of it like this slice almost. And then, so it's called a project. It's just like, it's a text file with a naming convention and it's markdown. So it's markdown coding, I guess, but we're all sort of figuring out different patterns. I think there's kind of no right way to do it.
Yeah, no, I like you, I love seeing exactly how people are doing it because I think that is where you where the rubber's meeting the road right now. I mean that because one of the big challenges here is that you're touching on is that in some ways the LLM can be too powerful for its own good. Like it can go too far off the rails. It's as important to tell it where to stop as it is to tell it what to do, because it will absolutely just like keep on going. And next thing you know, you'll be, what? I have features I didn't even know that I wanted. Yeah, that's super interesting. We'll have to talk about Spec Hub more as it develops. Okay. Well, what else is on your mind? What are you going to be thinking about over the next, the coming weeks? What do you wish you could see from the world, or that someone?
I mean, I think I'm pretty excited. I mean, to be honest, I think this is like more conviction about like a general direction than I think I've kind of felt, anytime in my career before. Like I did 2 startups, neither was particularly successful in getting product market fit, but I had enough conviction to like, quit my job and, join, start a company with a friend and, hire some folks. But there's like this, I just feel like I'm just seeing enough signals from like different people I talk to, people smart people that like, we're all sort of seeing, I think, like glimmers of some future, but it's still pretty foggy. And we're just trying to figure out like what is out there. So what I'm excited about actually, I mean, I have like a few projects in progress that I'm excited just to like get out, Spectree, Spec Hub, like a little fuzzy empire of like little like 1-person projects here. But I'm actually excited just like using this more in like real use cases. And so like I'm helping my wife with the project, I'm chatting with like, startup who is kind of thinking about things here. So for me, like with the rubber meets the road and like, can I start, getting out even just like, what I might flip to, like for me, writing's quite hard. Like it's just hard to like write up something that makes sense for an audience. So I think I'm gonna, I'll still be putting out some blog posts, but I'm guessing I'm gonna also just flip to like, could I just launch a little demo like every week and like something? It can be something small. It could be like, hey, I need a README generator to like update READMEs in my repos. Okay, that's it. Just like README writer, or like yeah, I'm thinking quite a bit about like design systems. Like, how do you kind of specify? I make a little app. Okay, I want it to not look like every other, Indigo, Tailwind, AI app in the world. So like, yeah, how do I almost have a little conversation about like who it's for, what the vibes are, like, turn that into a design system. So anyway, I think like hopefully what you'll see from me if I'm successful is like that I can basically like go from idea to like fairly polished production thing, just like narrow scope. And like, if I could start just doing that every week and going through those reps, and then in the background, I don't know what Spec Hub is yet, but like I think if it's something that's like it's going to be a tool just for me to like make that process better for myself and like kind of
Mm.
spec tree. Do I have the primitives right? I don't know. I have to like I think they feel kind of right, but like I won't really know until I just like go through the 5 reps and like and I'm like okay, yeah, this is like starting to work. So that's kind of what I'm excited about. Just like real use cases, rubber meets the road. Just keep going and like getting feedback, chatting with folks like you.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. The thing that I am most interested in right now is how um, is what the room looks like or what the box looks like that humans and AI collaborate in. Because
Mm,
I feel like you said something earlier on about the challenge is shoving in the right context. I have one of my toy apps right now is a local newspaper that is AI generated for my hometown. It pulls in the PDFs from the meetings, it pulls in the videos, it parses those, and then it uses that to compile like a really simple like, hey, what's happening? And this has been useful for me to have a way to like actually like try to use these tools and see where they work and see where they don't. And so as I've been, evaling versions of that, one of the things that I notice is that I almost never at this point have a like what I'll call an intelligence error where
hmm
the AI um, makes them has the right inputs and gets the wrong output.
hmm
I have a bunch of context errors where the wrong context gets brought in, and because the wrong context gets brought in, you get a bad result. Or one of my tools broke, and so the wrong the wrong context comes in, and so then it becomes really important to design the way to get the context in and out.
hmm
And so that's the thing that where I just am like poking at that from it's what I feel like I see everywhere in the same way that you're like you see fuzzy compilers all the way down.
Totally.
I see context environments everywhere I
Love
look.
it.
Anyway.
I mean, I love it. I mean, the one way to think about these things is that it's almost like a context factory or something. That's
Yeah, totally.
like
Right.
the LLM is almost like the little fuzzy CPU at the center. That's just like cool. It can like you can put fuzzy stuff in and you can sort of get structured stuff out. But like a lot of the problem is like almost like building this little factory where like okay, what context do we need it? Where does it come from? How do we feed it in, combine it, like, and then what do we get out? But I think or sort of many of the kinds of apps we're all building is sort of some variation on that idea. Yeah, I'm hoping that you're gonna like help solve this like boxes I can run things in problem because it's just like that's another just like maybe a topic for another time. But like
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough to understand Git work trees. I tried. I'm just like I can't do it. It's like so I like to kind of keep them pretty isolated. But if they run remotely, I get isolation, but then I can't iterate fast. If they're local, I can iterate my editor, but then I can only do one thing at a time. I mean, it's just like a little bit crazy right now. Like we haven't really built the right primitives we need yet. Yeah, I think that lots of context errors, lots of stepping on toes errors, new kinds of errors that we kind of haven't experienced before.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Plenty to talk about next time. Hopefully, we'll have some demos, and that is that.